Welcome. How's it going, guys? Welcome to the America First History channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video by the American Battlefield Trust on the French and Indian War animated battle map. This is actually my first YouTube video, by the way. So, um, happy to do. Let's get into it. 1754 to 1763. See, what a lot of people don't know is the French and Indian War was a stepping stone into the American Revolution. A lot of the players that were in the French and Indian War will play a big part in the American Revolution. But the French and Indian War was a smaller segment of what was called the 7 Years' War, which is actually the first, arguably the first World War. But let's get in.
During the 17th and early 18th century, British colonists faced a constant struggle to establish control over the Atlantic coast and create and defend colonial settlements from Georgia to modern-day Maine.
What is interesting is you see the map here. You see how South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia extend. There's no borders. With their original charters, they actually extended to the Pacific coast, which was amazing. But they didn't know what was beyond, so that's how the charters were laid out. But the northern states were charted off by this point.
Through diplomacy and armed conflict with Native Americans. At the same time, a smaller number of French colonists carve out a domain amidst the Great Lakes, along the St. Lawrence River, and west of the Appalachian Mountains. By the middle of the 18th century, both sides lay claim to the area surrounding the head of the Ohio River. Soon, open conflict flares into war.
Yeah, see, the open frontier was is basically a no man's land, and you could say the precursor of the Wild West. But Fort Duquesne was a hub with a lot of conflict between the British and the French, um, which you will see is our future first president will be the antagonizer that basically started a world war. But we'll see that soon.
Virginia Governor Robert Dinwiddie sends George Washington as part of a small colonial force to assert British control of the area around the Forks of Ohio. Fighting begins in 1754 with British victory at the Battle of Jumonville Glen. The arrival of more French troops, however, forced Washington to surrender at Fort Necessity. The following year, General Edward Braddock leads a force of British regulars toward the forks of the Ohio. But his troops...
See, the Battle of the Monongahela. Braddock had no idea of the terrain, and the French were having an alliance with the Indians in the area, and they knew the terrain and they ambushed them along the trail, which basically left Washington in charge to lead the retreat.
Lose the Battle of the Monongahela, in which Braddock is killed. Fighting soon sprawls across land known today as Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and New York. What started as a war in the backwoods soon spreads like wildfire across the globe. French forces hold the upper hand in North America.
When I mentioned that it was technically one of the First World War, it's actually kind of true. The 7 Years' War spread over 5 continents and involved a lot of powerful European players. They had to start to form alliances, these alliances will intertwine in the end of this century, following into the Napoleonic Wars and so on.
Through growing distrust and French encouragement, the Cherokee break their alliance with the British. Open war follows in 1759. Raids and skirmishes in Gulf, North Carolina, South Carolina, and modern-day Tennessee. In 1760, the British send a massive army into Cherokee territory that destroys crops and towns, ending Cherokee resistance for a time. British naval forces prevail over the French fleet in several battles, while increasing numbers of well-trained and well-equipped British forces arrive in North America. These forces turn the tide, and British victories follow. In 1759,
With here, they're going to be explaining the Battle of the Plains of Abraham in Quebec. One of our young soldiers is going to be future General Clinton, which is he's accompanied in this siege / battle against the French at Quebec.
the British win the Battle of Quebec. Within a year, outmanned and outfought, French forces surrender all of Canada. With the Treaty of Paris formally ending the French and Indian War, known in Europe as the 7 Years' War, England takes control of Canada and the vast territory between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River. To protect and control their larger domain, the royal government enacts rules and tax policies to pay war debts and raise money for troops who arrive in the colonies to protect their new territory.
See, this starts the taxes that the British wanted to raise to pay for their war debts at the behest of the American public, which the Americans didn't agree with, which stacked on top of each other and just became different debts, different taxes to pay for different debts.
But the policies anger many colonists and fuel growing anti-British sentiment.
See, the end of the war led with the British taking over huge amounts of French territory. So this left the British to control over French subjects, which spoke French, were mostly Catholic. This ran into problems when it came to Canada and dealing with Canada, because the Americans were mostly Protestant and the French were Catholic. So this led to a lot of problems in the future, especially with the Quebec Act in 1775, when the British basically let the French subjects of Canada practice Catholicism and have sovereignty to the land, which made a lot of British subjects, which were the Americans at the time, very upset. And it canceled any of their expansion to the west. But we'll talk about that on another reaction video. But thanks, guys. How about you hit a like button and subscribe? Thanks a lot.